increase our faith. Maybe sometimes we wonder, do I have enough faith? Maybe especially when things are hard for us in our life, or maybe we think, maybe I just don't know enough about it to have a whole lot of faith, or I don't know, maybe we think, maybe I'm just not good enough to have a lot of faith, or maybe we think my life's too messed up to ever have any kind of faith. I think we see the same kind of struggle in our first reading from Habakkuk. There, as we hear, there's a lot going on around Habakkuk with Israel being taken over. He says there's just violence and discord and chaos and just all this swirl of stuff. And he even prays, like, I cry out to you, Lord, and you do not listen to me. So maybe it seems like Habakkuk doesn't have a lot of faith that God's gonna make good out of this. But even when we cry out to the Lord, that right there shows some faith. Any kind of prayer that we have is an act of faith. And we see the Lord responding to this prayer, saying that there's this vision, there's this plan that just hasn't been fulfilled yet. Until Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of God's big plan to come in and save us and to really bring us back into relationship. It's Jesus whom his own apostles, like his most intimate friends and companions, we hear ask him, increase our faith. Now, right before this, Jesus is trying to teach them that you have to forgive people always. And it's really bad if you lead anybody into sin. And so they're probably thinking, like, I don't know if I can do all that. We need some help. And so they said to the Lord, increase our faith. And it's interesting that Jesus doesn't just say to them, okay, boom, you have more faith. Or reaches into his faith wallet and just starts like divvying out some more coinage or whatever. He says, no, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted into the sea. As some of you know, I don't know a whole lot about plants. With a mulberry tree, I had a lot of root systems, and I know you don't plant trees in the sea. I don't think it works. So Jesus is telling them, if you had just a little bit of faith, even the smallest amount, you could actually do what seems impossible. And those apostles had to have had some faith. I mean, they were with Jesus all day, every day, for all that time. They dropped everything and left everything and followed him. And so he doesn't say, yeah, you're right, you don't have enough faith. He says, take what faith you have, and when you call upon that, you can do amazing things. We certainly know the need for this in our own life. Those times, especially like with Habakkuk experience, that are just sort of crazy. We look around and we see, problems in the world like Ukraine, like shootings, like bullying, or maybe just our own life is just sort of a big chaotic mess, it seems. But even just a little bit of faith has a lot of power. I think maybe it's not so much about having a great faith, but having faith in a great God. As I mentioned on the podcast I read this week, that N.T. Wright has this nice image of faith as a window. And that a window looks out onto something on the other side. And what's on the other side in the realm of faith is God. It's the Father Creator, the Son who saves, and the Spirit who sanctifies and gives life. And he says it doesn't matter what size your window is. It could be like floor to ceiling, wall to wall, or it could be just like a peephole. What matters is what we're looking upon. We're looking upon the very life of God. Not about having a great faith, but having faith in a great God. I was thinking of a couple examples of the saints with this. One being St. Francis of Assisi. His feast day is in a couple of days, October 4th. So St. Francis, he's in prayer one day before he was St. Francis, and the Lord said to him, Francis, you see my church is in ruins, rebuild my church. And right then, he didn't assemble all these hundreds of volunteers and get them to commit to a life of poverty and chastity and obedience and write this rule and just kind of form this whole like worldwide Franciscan movement. When the Lord first said to him, rebuild my church, he looked around, saw this chapel that was kind of crumbling, and said, oh, okay. So started picking up bricks and just putting them back together. Of course, the Lord had more in store for him, and probably at that moment, if he knew how his life would turn out, maybe he wouldn't have believed it. But he just had that faith to continue to just sort of go along with what God had in store for him and wanted to do in him and through him. So I was thinking, too, of St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, who many of us remember when she was alive, and we considered her a living, walking saint. Of course, that's been confirmed now. But after Mother Teresa died, it came out in her writings that she really struggled in faith, that she had a lot of difficulty and uncertainty in her life, and that she really didn't feel God's presence for like 50 years. And the critics were like, oh, see, Mother Teresa, not so great, didn't have a whole lot of faith apparently. But how could she have done what she did without any faith? To go out and reach out to the people who literally were thrown out by the world, and to get other people to join her by her example, and to call out the whole world for selfishness, and to spend 2 hours a day in prayer. I think she obviously had enough faith, and through that, God was able to do what maybe she thought was impossible. Maybe there's a time in your own life, looking back, you're like, I never could have done that without God. And my faith, even though I struggled with it maybe at the time, really got me through this difficult part of my life, or helped me to grow in this certain way, or to accomplish something that I never could have done on my own. Of course, none of us do anything on our own. We all need the grace of God. And the presence of God is with us. In our second reading, St. Paul reminds Timothy, and through him us, that we have the Holy Spirit dwelling within us. He says we've not received a spirit of cowardice, we've received a spirit of power and love and self-control. Or we could say a spirit of strength and charity and wisdom. That's on the other side. And then we can look upon that and call upon that. I think one of the lessons today is that just a little bit of faith has a lot of power for us in our lives. As we encounter Jesus here in the Mass today, let us indeed know that he is present indeed in our midst, that he is with us, that he is for us, and that by his grace we can accomplish all sorts of things, even things we thought were impossible.